Good evening and welcome to Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. My name is Buffy. I'm an 18-year criminal defense attorney. And so I will not be telling you that someone got off on a technicality. I'll rather use real legal language that actually makes sense and gives you a reason. Additionally, the compassion part comes in because these victims were actual people. They weren't video game characters. They weren't fake characters. They were actual people who were loved by others. And this case is called the ChessBoard murder, the curious case of Mary Phagan and the Leo Frank trial. This is a historic, controversial, layered case and is one of the most analyzed cases in the American criminal justice system. This is the case where one child's murder ignited a national firestorm, a courtroom circus, a wrongful conviction, a governor's desperate attempt at mercy, and the only lynching of a Jewish man in American history, all before the truth was settled. So the victim was Mary Phagan, age 13, a factory worker, a child laborer, and she earned 10 cents an hour. She was last seen picking up her pay envelope. A child whose death became a symbol, long before anyone knew what had actually happened to her. So let's talk about the case overview. We're in Atlanta, Georgia in 1913, the National Pencil Company. Mary arrives to collect her pay from factory superintendent Leo Frank. Hours later, her body is found in the basement, bruised, strangled, and dragged across the floor. The case explodes instantly into a sensational press, racial tension, antisemitism, child labor debates, political pressure, a courtroom full of shouting spectators. Can you imagine a courtroom like that? The chaos that is involved in all of this, political pressure. And sitting at the center was Leo Frank, an educated northern Jewish factory superintendent. There were also threats of violence, and it is a trial in name only. With all this chaos, there's no way you could actually have a fair, balanced trial in this media circus. So we have two suspects. We have suspect number one, Leo Frank, who was the factory superintendent. The prosecution claims that he was nervous. He had an opportunity. Conley's story implicates him. The weaknesses are no physical evidence, no motive, and the time window was extremely short. Behavior was consistent with shock, not guilt. Suspect 2 was Jim Conley, who was a janitor. Evidence pointing to him includes new details only the killer would know. His handwriting matched the murder notes, which seems pretty conclusive, right? However, I'm not 100% sure that handwriting analysis was a thing, or if it was just naked eye analysis, who knows. His stories changed multiple times, which again could be an indicia of guilt. He had fresh scratch marks on his arms, which again, you think if you're strangling someone, they clearly would probably be trying to claw you to get your hand off of their neck or off of the cord or whatever it was. Known to be intoxicated often. But the South in 1913 considered a black man's testimony against a Jewish man to be convenient, and the press made sure of it. So the theories are that Conley acted alone. Modern scholars view this as most consistent. Theory 2, Frank killed Mary and Conley covered it up. This is the historical prosecution theory, which clearly doesn't make any sense given the fact that, as they said, Frank seemed more nervous than that. And from what we're seeing, he apparently didn't have any shifting stories. And then the third theory is a third-party intruder, but this was least supported because the factory was locked. And below him in the factory hierarchy, Jim Conley, a black janitor, was shifting alibis. This is where the justice system cracks wide open. So let's talk about the timeline. Saturday, April 26, 1913. Mary arrives at the factory at noon. Frank gives her her pay envelope, and this is the last confirmed sighting of Mary alive. That night, the night watchman, Newt Lee, finds her body in the basement. She has a cord around her neck, bloody head wound, drag marks, and her undergarments were torn. Beside her, 2 handwritten murder notes. April 27th through 29th, police interrogate everyone. The factory girls, their supervisors, the night watchman, the janitor, Leo Frank. Conley changes his story repeatedly. He initially says he didn't see anything. Then he says he helped Frank move the body. Then he says Frank dictated the notes. Then he says Frank killed her alone. The more Conley talks, the more the press writes. Under public pressure, Frank is arrested before physical evidence is even processed. And July through August, the courtroom fills with 2,000 spectators, reporters packed shoulder to shoulder and shouting. So let's talk about something called due process violations. Due process violations are very important, especially in our criminal justice system, to make sure that a trial is fair and impartial and balanced. Ultimately, that means that the defense has no obligation to put on a case. As we often say in criminal jury trials, we say we really don't have any obligation. It's the state's obligation to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. What is beyond a reasonable doubt? It's doubt that literally should get rid of all doubts, right? And in this scenario, you have Conley, who has a lot of problems. And so could he have been convicted? I mean, it's likely given the shifting story, because people often feel like, if you're not guilty, why are you shifting your story? Why do you go from, he acted alone, or he dictated the notes, or he moved the body, or there's all these things that are just kind of screaming at you. And also you think about, oftentimes juries are intimidated by crowds, especially shouting crowds, which you might call a hang-em crowd, right? A crowd who is looking for vengeance, and vengeance for this 13-year-old girl, which is probably somewhat of a thoughtful gesture to mean that her life did matter. Yes, it did. She had people who loved her. She worked hard. I mean, she was already a child laborer. I mean, she clearly had a rough life. But the judge refused to remove the audience. And nowadays, we have modern cases, for instance, the Richard Allen case of the girls who were killed in Indiana. There was a big issue about allowing cameras into the courtroom, because oftentimes cameras bring a lot more loud, bring a lot more chaos, bring a lot of complicated issues as to whether or not someone is actually getting a fair trial. I know we watched the O.J. Simpson trial, we watched the Casey Anthony trial, we watched the George Zimmerman trial. I mean, there's all these cases that show potentially why courtroom coverage should not be 24 hours a day, because oftentimes journalists want to exploit it for their own gain, which is really, really sad. So Frank was absent for parts of testimony due to safety concerns. And so the point of that is that he didn't get to confront his accusers. And he essentially, did he really get due process in that? I mean, I think that he had the right to be there. I know that his safety was paramount, but ultimately, I mean, there's got to be another way to be able to make sure that he gets in there and he can hear what is being said against him. Also, the press was inflaming antisemitism. Again, that's something that definitely would have kind of upped the ante for him, especially being a Jewish individual. So that would be another reason that, again, kind of compounding the safety issue for him. And this alone could overturn a conviction today, because racial bias is not allowed. There is the idea that someone from a certain racial group should have a cross-section of the community, including the community that they're part of. And you cannot strike a juror on the basis of their race or, Jewish culture, anything like that. I think it's Batson is the case. So essentially, you have to be able to strike someone for cause. For instance, if they're like, I know he did it, I'm 100% sure, if I'm on the jury, I'm finding him guilty. Well, not only is that a big problem, because clearly, you're causing it, and some people do that to try to get out of the jury. But the other thing is you have to worry about is tainting the entire jury pool. But there might have been people who were actually gunning to be on the jury. So, I mean, that's another factor you have sometimes. So, coerced or contaminated testimony. Conley's statement changed each time police fed him new details. And again, in my mind, that is a lot of police corruption. And that is a situation where they wanted it to be frank. And so they were trying to manipulate witnesses to steer the way they wanted them to steer. There was a governor's review, and Governor John Slayton risked his career reviewing the case. He conducted an independent investigation. He found expert witness errors. He found bias in jury and courtroom behavior. And he concluded a verdict was impossible under these conditions. He commuted Frank's death sentence to life. Let's talk about the lynching. On June 17, 1915, a mob kidnaps Frank from prison, drives 100 miles, and lynches him. No arrests, no prosecutions, no accountability. Later, there was a posthumous pardon, not for innocence, only for the state's failure to keep him safe. And ultimately, if you have the ability to be kidnapped while you are in custody, that is truly an injustice and is truly, truly sad. The other thing that's interesting is the fact that there were two races at play here. There was the Jewish race and there was the African American race. And ultimately, they pitted them against each other, which is really sad. You just kind of wonder, this kind of has a kind of KKK kind of feel going on, which is really unfortunate. So let's talk about where the case is. The murder of Mary Phagan is technically unsolved, though most modern legal historians believe Conley was responsible. And I truly think that that is the thing that makes the most sense. I know we don't have a lot of the facts, given the fact that there was some handwriting issues there where it matched Conley. There was the shifting stories. He knew things that the killer would know. All of those things clearly amount to circumstantial evidence. But did he talk to someone? Did he know someone? Did he have help? How did that all go around? And so the verdict seriously is, or almost certainly is, that Leo Frank was wrongfully convicted, and thus he was murdered for something that he didn't do. Which it's better one guilty man go free than an innocent person be charged for something and or murdered for something that they did not do. Comment Mary, and I'll send you the full case sheet. Thank you for tuning in, and feel free to like and subscribe to Grace and Gavel. We really would appreciate you subscribing and liking this episode, and also letting someone know that's a true crime junkie tune in and learn about some historic cases and some obscure cases. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your night. Good night. Bye-bye.